This podcast is not sponsored or supported by any business or organization. The views reflected on these podcast episodes are my own. Please be aware I am not a medical expert, travel agent, or any other kind of expert. Hey everyone, welcome to the Eat, Explore, Love podcast. I'm Ashley. This podcast is based off of my blog of the same name, Eat, Explore, Love. It talks about the unique challenges in traveling around the world when you have celiac disease. Due to sort of popular demand, I decided to also record a podcast to delve a little deeper into my travels and the lessons learned along the way. Hi everyone! As we approach the end of the year, we are also approaching the end of Season 1 of Eat, Explore, Love, the podcast. It's been a wild ride with lots of adventures to share. We are taking the first few months of the year to regroup and figure out our next steps, and the Eat, Explore, Love team would love to hear from you. We have a couple of ideas brewing, but we want to hear from our listeners to see if there's anything that would be helpful for you. We're looking for any type of feedback, ranging from, should I look into getting a co-host? Would you like to be more of an active part of the podcast where I interview you guys about your favorite cities? Would you want to hear from more medical experts, travel experts, self-love experts? If you have any thoughts, we want to hear them at hieatexplorelove@gmail.com. We at Eat Explore Love appreciate all of your support and kindness in listening over the past year. That's 130 episodes that you've sat through and listened to. I've been so lucky to not only be able to go on all the adventures I've been able to experience, but I've been so lucky to have all of you to share this with. Make sure to sign up for our newsletter and send us an email at hieatexplorelove@gmail.com. Now, back to the show. It's another episode of Eat, Explore, Love, the podcast. On this episode, I'm chatting with founder of Genetic Insights, Elwin Robinson. Hear his health journey and how taking a 23andMe test helped get him some much-needed answers, and how he took that journey and is currently trying to pay it forward to help others on a similar journey. At the end of the episode, there is a code you're going to be able to use and get a discount and use his platform and get your genetic answers. So please make sure to listen to the entire episode. Hi, Elwin. It's so lovely to meet you. Thank you for joining us at Eat, Explore, Love, the podcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I always start off every interview by asking my guests. I, of course, do a little bit of research on you, but I would love to hear from you in your own words about your background, who you are, things like that. So who are you?
Well, I think there's some commonality between our stories,
Mhm.
from what, a little bit of research I did in your background as well. I also was raised by parents who are very much into health and alternative health. My, kitchen cupboards were full of supplements and organic foods and all that kind of stuff. The bookshelves throughout the house were filled with books on health and nutrition. My father was a biochemist who became a science teacher. My mother was an English teacher who had um, cancer 4 times in her life, and she also had tumors many other times. I don't know exactly how many. And so there was a kind of constant situation in our health where she would like get a diagnosis again, and then it would be like action stations and everyone's eating healthy food, and she would do these detox protocols and supplement regimes and practitioners and this and that, and she would also do these self-hypnosis kind of heal yourself tapes, I don't know, frequently. And I got to see that when she did that, sometimes also with medical intervention when it was, cancer, but some surgery I think is the only thing she had. She never had chemo.
Mm,
And then sometimes not, when it was just a tumor, she would just do all that stuff and then she'd get better.
mm,
And then, sure enough, I'd also observed that she would then immediately drop all that kind of stuff, go back to maybe a less positive mental attitude, go back to eating, junk food, all that kind of stuff. And her health and state would decline again. So I saw a very vivid illustration of the correlation between your lifestyle, your attitude, your environment, and all that, and your health again and again during my childhood, and was very exposed to all that kind of stuff. My dad was, into all these kind of extreme diets as well, but probably typically as someone who is quite disagreeable by nature, and in fact that's in one of my genetic reports. I decided to go the other way. I rebelled, and so I didn't go down the conventional educational route, and also I didn't go down the health route. I was like working as a chef. I was I'd say a drug addict. I would drink a lot. I would smoke cigarettes, all of that kind of stuff, and I did that until my late 20s. And by then my dad was already diagnosed with ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, and I kind of started to get the early symptoms of that. I was signed off work for a while by a doctor, and I was started to realize, if I carry on down this path soon, I'm going to be in that same position of being, helpless and incapable. Like I could just see my life going downhill. So I decided to change my ways. I decided to quit all the drugs, which was not easy. And I kind of went extreme the other way. I quit smoking, but I quit like all processed foods, coffee, any kind of stimulant, coffee, any kind of alcohol, all of that kind of stuff. And then I went to a vegan diet, which I thought was a good idea. Then I went to a raw vegan diet, which I did 100%, which is not easy to do. I managed to do that for a few years. And, maybe just because I purified everything, cut out a lot of poisons, I did start to get better and better and healthier. And not only my physical health improved and my energy and stuff, but also my mindset. Before that, I would say I was very much in a victim state of mind. And also, just like trying to get by week by week, getting in more and more debt. No fault of anything positive or constructive. But as I start to heal my body, questions started to pop into my mind like, what could I do to actually contribute to the world? What could I do that's actually meaningful? And it took me into my late 20s to ask myself that question. I guess some people never do, so I shouldn't be too hard on myself, but it's still kind of amazing to think back. Um, and so I was like, okay, well, chefing is what I know. I'll work in a health food restaurant, right? That's preparing healthy food for people. So I started doing that. And I started to have this experience where people kind of, I don't know, got a sense of my reputation as being fairly knowledgeable because I'd studied a lot. And I also studied this stuff when I was younger. I had like a qualification in it when I was 16 or whatever. And so they kept asking me questions about health. And eventually I was like, you know what? I got to get back to the kitchen. I kept being behind on like orders and stuff, but I said, do you want to like just pay me for an hour and I'll sit down and I'll answer your questions? They said, great. And so from that, I started putting videos on YouTube. This is back in 2009. And eventually I was like, I keep repeating myself over and over again. Maybe I should write this down. So I wrote a book, and then I did a bunch of video courses. And then people kept asking me, where do I get these things you're recommending? And I set up my own online supplement store, and it was all very organic. And, I ended up meeting a bunch of other influencers who very kindly promoted my work because I helped them, and I ended up traveling the world, doing speaking tours, all of that stuff that you're supposed to do as a health teacher or whatever. And I felt great for a while, actually, really between late 20s and 39. And then 39 I was suddenly stricken, and I say I felt great. I mean, I felt way better during that period than I ever had any other point in my whole life, including my so-called youth. So I thought everything was great. Yes, I was a bit underweight. Yes, I had a few kind of food allergies and intolerances and issues, but I thought, it's just the way it is, and I was happy. Then at the age of 39, I developed this stabbing pain in my right rib cage area. I figured, first of all, that it might be the liver because it's that kind of area, and also because I was quite familiar with kind of Eastern, medicine back then. I did like Taoist herbal medicine, for instance, and I had a qualification in Taoist system of healing. So I went to a medical doctor first. I got like a MRI, CT scan, blood work, endo, like everything that they would normally do is like a full suite of things I'd done in Singapore, and they couldn't find anything wrong. Doctor over here in England couldn't find anything wrong. Medical doctors couldn't find the problem. So then I went for like functional medicine doctor, naturopath, nutritionist, microbiome expert, because all this pain kind of got worse when I ate. So I was still assuming it was a digestive issue. None of that worked. Then I thought, okay, maybe it's a structural thing, maybe it's like muscle, nervous system,
Mm.
fascia, something like that. So then I went down that route. I saw a chiropractor, physiotherapist, osteopath, craniosacral counter strain, all kinds of other more obscure things. All of that route, and it was good and interesting and beneficial in some ways, and I learned a lot, but it didn't help. That pain was still there. In fact, often those sessions that were supposed to be relieving tension would actually make it worse.
Yeah.
Then I thought, well, maybe it's kind of, sometimes it's so bad I'd end up in an emergency room. I'm 6'3". I had always been a bit underweight. I was always like 150 pounds ish, but I got
Yeah.
down to like 120 ish pounds. I was very underweight. I was filled with constant anxiety. I was cold all the time,
Mm.
constant extreme digestive discomfort, and this stabbing pain. And this pain was the type that painkillers were not effective for. So not only did NSAIDs not help, which I guess is fairly common, but even opiates, which is usually a last resort, not only didn't work, but actually made it worse.
Mm.
So there was no effective painkiller that worked for it. So that was the position I was in. And I was like, maybe these doctors are looking at me like I'm kind of making it up. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm a hypochondriac. Maybe this is all in my head. Maybe this is like some kind of emotional issue manifesting as a physical symptom. So I went down that avenue, and I did like a traditional psychotherapist, and I did, like more spiritual stuff, and I did like Joe
Mhm.
Dispenza's system of, manifesting healing in your body, and it's an hour or more of meditation every day, focusing on yourself being healthy, all of that kind of stuff, and none of that was effective.
Right.
And so, by that time, I was several years in. I was very fortunate to be able to uh, dedicate all of my life to health, because luckily my business before had been successful. But I didn't feel obviously good about that. I felt like a bit of a fraud that I've been doing and teaching health for so long, and suddenly I had this insurmountable, what seemed like a health problem, though even that wasn't certain. And then I came across something one night. This was like I had problems sleeping as well. So this was probably 1 in the morning or something, like studying about health again. I'm sure some of your viewers and listeners can relate to that situation. And I came across this thing that was like, if you've ever done a genetic testing platform before, like 23andMe, which I had, then you can get your raw data from that. And within a few hours, we're going to be able to provide you all this information about your health and wellness.
Mhm.
And I was like, huh, interesting. I hadn't even heard of that at the time. And I was like, okay, I'll try it. I was desperate. It wasn't that expensive, although it was probably at a level that would be outreach to some people. So we'll discuss that. But it wasn't crazy considering all the different practitioners and tests I'd already paid for. And so I decided to go for it. And sure enough, within a few hours, I had access to all of this information, like just a vast repository that, I dug into very enthusiastically. And I'd love to say, it was simple. They told me what was wrong with it. That was it. But it wasn't as simple as that for me. It
Okay.
actually, I'm surprised how often it is that simple for some of the people I work with, but it's certainly not guaranteed. But what it was for me is it gave me a series of clues. There are various different underlying root issues that I identified. And through identifying them, then doing testing to confirm them in most cases. Because, of course, just because you have a genetic likelihood or risk of having something doesn't mean you definitely have it. And so I actually tested in all cases, blood tests, saliva, urine, whatever it might be, to confirm that was actually the case.
Mm.
And it was, it was extremely accurate and helpful. And then, through that, I managed to not only work out what the cause of this mystery pain was that was ruining my quality of life, but actually address a bunch of underlying issues that I'd had for a long time, even before this problem manifested, that I didn't even realize. And I'm in the stage now where I'm, mid 40s and feeling, yeah, fantastic, better than I ever have by far, and getting that feedback from people regularly. I just had my wife's friend, who I see every few months, come in. She's like, "Wow, you really seem like you're doing really well this time." Afterwards, I was like, "Oh, that's nice to hear as feedback. Thank you." But I do feel it. I feel great, and I'm certain that wouldn't have happened without that intervention. Now, I realize that I could be an anomaly. I could be an outlier, or whatever. So next, I tried it with my wife. I tried it with a few of my best friends. I tried it with all my business partners, all the family members who were willing to do it, all my employees who were willing to do it. And so I ended up doing it with a couple of dozen people and seeing their results and going through it with them. And I was like, yeah, this is really accurate and this is really helpful. The one thing was that that platform that I was using was pretty complicated, and also the price was pretty high. And so then I was like, you know what? I'd love to be able to just get this to everyone and have it be available at an affordable price, and also at a level of simplicity where the average person who's maybe informed about health but who's not really deep into it can actually understand it and make use of it without feeling overwhelmed. And so I ended up, speaking to that same company, and we worked out something where I was able to license the technology. We built our own, simplified platform where we could then offer it cheaper. Took 2 years. It's supposed to take 3 months. One of those things with technology is never easy, and the security and privacy and all those kind of things are super important, and you've got to get right. But yeah, so that's the I guess the shortest version. I need to work on probably editing it down of my story to share how I ended up talking to you right here, right now.
No, I love that. And oftentimes, so this podcast, we talk a lot about living with celiac disease. And so a lot of times I'll hear in people's stories that they found out through 23andMe that they had it, that they were spending, their stories were very similar to yours, that
Mhm.
no one could figure it out. No one, or doctors kept telling them it was all in their head. And then they went and did this 23andMe test, and they took it back to those doctors and said, okay, this is what 23andMe says, please like test me for this because you haven't done this one yet. And then turned out it was all, they had it.
Yep.
And this is not sponsored by 23andMe, this podcast episode, and I have no affiliation with them other than I took the test as well myself, just to see out of curiosity if it confirmed things I'd been diagnosed with, which for the most part it did. And then, like you, it also gave me some extra insights. For So you got these results, you put them in a platform, or did you then go to back to those same doctors and say, okay, these are results that I've gotten, can you confirm it? What was the step? Can you clarify that step for me of, did you
Yeah,
go back
sure.
to medical professionals?
For me, it was a few different things. Like, I wish that my issue was as simple as something like celiac, to be honest. I mean, I
Right.
don't think I've eaten gluten since, again, my late 20s,
Mhm.
I was
Yeah.
already doing that kind of obvious stuff, and unfortunately, that wasn't enough. And to be honest, I think most of the people who work with me or find me, they're people who've tried a lot of the obvious stuff. Maybe
Yeah.
they're not sticking to all of it, but they've at least tried it for a while, and none of that kind of stuff has worked. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I would say our platform compares very favorably to 23andMe. I mean, it contains vastly more information. As to accuracy, I guess that's a bit more of a judgment call, but I
Mhm.
would consider it to be more accurate as well. I mean, just to give you an example, if we're talking about allergies and intolerances, a few of the things that we can also tell you about is, casein, shrimp allergy, peanut allergy, general food allergies, salicylate intolerance, histamine intolerance, oxalate sensitivity, organophosphate sensitivity. Like, I won't go through the whole list, but you get the idea. Like, there's
Mhm.
dozens of different things, and in my experience, often it isn't as obvious as gluten. It's something obscure, like
Right.
salicylates. Just I had a client the other day, and he's like, I've tried every elimination diet out there I thought I had, and I was always reacting to things. And I've never even heard of this salicylate thing, and
Yeah.
most people haven't unless they're carnivores, which is
Yeah.
still pretty unusual. And it is in a lot of plant foods, but not all, so you don't have to be carnivore. But so that's what I mean, like obscure stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, for me, so it depends what it was. In most cases, I actually did go to a medical doctor. So I'll give you one example. So one thing that I saw, although, one thing I saw is that I had a tendency to not be able to detoxify the heavy metal lead very well.
Okay.
This came up as genetic. Now, just because you have that doesn't mean you actually have lead, because of course it still requires environmental exposure. This is not determined by genes. And actually, I'd done a hair mineral analysis before and had not had high lead in my hair. I'd even done a urine heavy metals test before and had not had high lead or any other heavy metals in my urine. And so I'd already dismissed that wasn't the problem. But because I saw it there, I was like, you know what? I'm going to actually do the blood test, which is the
Okay.
most accurate test to actually do that's really available. I suppose a biopsy would be more accurate, but that's very invasive. Um, and so I did it, and I did it privately because there's no way an NHS doctor over here in England would ever agree to something like that. But it did fit all my symptoms. unexplained abdominal pain, unexplained weight loss, emotional dysregulation, low energy, feeling cold. A lot of those things were actually classic symptoms of lead toxicity.
Mm.
And I did the blood test, and the reference range is 0 to 3 micrograms per deciliter. The level which the World Health Organization considers an emergency and you should be hospitalized was 45, and
Okay.
mine was 27.
Okay.
So it was closer to need for hospitalization. Now, no one ever would have guessed that. And as I say, I saw a lot of practitioners who specialize in this kind of thing, like functional medicine people, but no one would guess that despite having low levels of heavy metals in your hair and urine, that you have such an incredibly high level in your blood. In fact, the only way that something like that would happen is if your body was really bad at detoxifying that heavy metal, which of course was actually the case, and which is what my genetics showed up. So
Right.
then I did that test myself. I organized that myself and paid for it myself. Then I went back to the NHS doctor and I said, here are these results. Over here, they have this attitude of if we didn't do the test, it doesn't count. So they then reordered those tests, and they found they didn't have such a precise test, but it was 20-ish is what they
Mm.
decided. So, very similar. It was very high. I said to that doctor, I said, could this be the cause of all my symptoms? And he shrugged his shoulders and said, yeah, could be. And I said, okay, what are we going to do about it? And he said, um, we'll retest you in a year.
Like,
That was it. Because again, it's below that WHO threshold where it's treated as an emergency. The only other thing they said is, to be fair to them, it's very hard to detoxify lead, and usually the treatment procedure actually is to look at exposure.
mm.
So they were like, well, I was like, I basically hadn't left the house in a couple of years because of this debilitating illness. So it's like I'm
Yeah.
not working at a metal plant or
Yeah.
glazing plates or anything like that, an industrial setting. It's nothing like that. So is it something in the environment? Well, if my wife, who had been married to at the time for 10 years, I said she's drunk roughly the same water, she's eaten roughly the same food, she's eaten off the same plates, she's breathed the same air, all of the rest of it. Why don't you test her? So helpfully they did agree to test her. They tested her, and her level was like 1, which
Mhm.
is normal within reference range. And so when I looked into it deeper, looking at the WHO's report, it said the half life of lead in the body is 20 years. The body stores it anywhere because every cell kind of requires calcium, and your body often mistakes it for calcium, but it stores it especially in the bones because that's where calcium is concentrated. And so, what I understand to be the case is I probably had a medium to high, but maybe not even a crazy level of exposure a long time ago when I was younger.
Yeah.
My body wasn't able to detoxify it, so it just built up more and more in my bones. And then ever since then, and this is the funny thing, every time you do something to be healthy, like exercise or sauna or maybe take supplements which help detoxify you, like NRF2 upregulators, all of that stuff would increase the turnover of that. It would actually release more lead into my blood and make me feel worse. Um, and have a corrosive effect on any well, not corrosive, but a what's the word? Disabling effect on any cell that it then got into. And yeah, so it wasn't the only thing, but it was one piece of the puzzle. And yeah, they were extremely unhelpful. And no, but to be fair to them,
Yeah.
it is quite hard to help people with lead. But through my own efforts, I just got retested again recently, and I've now got it down to below 5.
Mm.
So it is slow. It's hard going to get it out. But at least I've almost got it to what like a normal reference range is from a
Yeah.
level that was, and my, as I said, earlier, my state of well-being and enjoyment of life and health and vitality and all that have, gone up immensely as well. Again, I don't think it's the only factor, but it's an example of something that even if I'd have said, like if I'd have managed to find this through my research and gone to a doctor and said, look, all my symptoms seem to align with lead toxicity. Can you test me for that? The chances that they would do something like that are negligible to zero, I would say. And I base that on, my own experience previously. I kind of had given up on them being into anything other than a mainstream explanation by then. But I speak to a lot of other people, clients, or just people who email me and stuff like that, who are trying to work with mainstream health professionals to identify what's wrong with them, and asking to be tested for various things. And they generally are extremely unwilling or reluctant, I would say, certainly in this country.
So then what would your advice be for someone that would be in your position? And I know that um certain things might seem simpler than others, but for whatever reason certain doctors just something super simple to diagnose can take up to 10 years to get a diagnosis on. At least that's how it could work in the States too. I'm not sure in the UK where you are if it works the same way. But
Mm.
what's your advice for people that keep reaching like you were dead end after dead end after dead end? They get these answers. They might not have doctors that are able to be helpful even once they get the answers from something from a platform like yours or 23andMe. What's your advice on steps that they should take in order to do their research and make sure they're doing the research correctly? Because there's, as we know, a lot of misinformation out there, and we rely upon our doctors to be able to tell us what's correct versus not. But if they're not even 100% certain on whatever you're diagnosed with, how do you then navigate that? There's a lot of questions in one. I'm
No, it's
sorry.
good. I got it. I got it. I think you can tell me if I miss any aspect of it, but
No.
I think the first step is um, to accept personal responsibility.
Mm,
And I always say when I see people who have like great, loving, supportive parents, which honestly I didn't have, I in some way I feel like sorry for them because I feel like they expect like the government or the institutions or the authorities to have that role. They expect these institutions to have their best interests at heart and to be caring for them. And I don't expect that because of the kind of childhood I had, not just my experience, but everyone I knew, no one I knew had healthy, supportive, you
yeah.
know, loving parenting. So that wasn't anything in my perceptual world that, would be expected. So I don't expect the government to look after my interests. I don't expect the
Mm,
medical establishment to look after the interests. I don't expect any of these institutions to look after my interests. I expect them to look after their interests. And
mm,
when I expect that, I'm not disappointed.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
exactly what they do. And so ultimately, the only one who's going to care about my health as much as me is probably me.
Mm,
Maybe your, wife or husband, maybe your parents, maybe your children. That's sometimes that does happen, and I'm sure you've had that as well. People bring people to you, and it seems like they care more about the person's health than the person themselves does.
yeah.
But that's pretty much it, right? So, and to be fair to the doctors and individuals, the system is set up for them to not care and is set up for them to fail in any kind of mainstream perspective. So in my country and most countries, we have nationalized healthcare. I know you guys don't have that, but your system still seems to be very similar nonetheless,
Mm,
where it's
closer and closer. Yeah.
like the insurance companies kind of take the place of the government funding it, but still they control what kind of doctor they will pay for and won't, and all the rest of it. So it's pretty similar in practice, I would say, from in terms of what we're talking about right now.
Yes.
Um, in that, if they prioritize everything, all of these systems on the basis of need. I,
Mm,
I say this. I know this is very controversial. You can edit it out if you don't like it. But um, whenever there's talk about this, it's very common that there's a talk about how the profit motive is the problem, especially when I speak to Americans. And I do think that's true, not just in America, but also in our country,
right.
because, of course, the pharmaceutical companies are in alignment with the regulatory bodies, not only in your country, but absolutely in mine. And they're creating, a monopoly to some extent. So, and the head of the pharmaceutical company will then become the head of the government that's supposed to be regulating them. All of that kind of stuff happens over here too. So the profit motive is definitely a factor as to why things are not working where the benefit of the patient is primary. But I do think the other factor is that the apportioning of resources in the whole medical establishment, and this is only a recent thing, I would say, like within less than 200 years, is entirely based on kind of a Marxist philosophy where it's pretty much entirely apportioned based on need. And
Mm,
so, what I mean by that is, when I say Marxist, is this idea of from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. I think if I were to sum up Marxism in a statement, I believe that's correct. So it's the to each according to their need. So, for instance, I know your country is almost going bankrupt because the amount that you guys spend on healthcare. like it's a lot, but 25% of what is spent on healthcare, I believe, is spent on keeping people alive for the last 10 days of their life
Mm,
in a state where most of them would probably wish that they weren't alive.
right.
So, why is that the case? Why is there so much of the budget allocated to people who are almost dead and so little allocated to preventing the problems and trying to work out what's causing all the chronic diseases rather than keeping people alive when they're almost dead of the chronic diseases? And I do
Mm,
think it is this mentality of, well, because you've got to allocate the resources depending on who needs it most. And
mm,
who needs resources most? The person who is dying or almost dead, right?
mm,
That makes sense. They do need it most, but the problem is if you allocate all the resources and the focus on people based on how far along they are on the gradient of disease and how severe their symptoms are and how close they are to death and how much they have a risk of death, it means that there's very little focus on prevention. So I'd
yeah.
say that's the philosophical arm of it. So the profit motive doesn't want to look at how to prevent things and what's really causing all these chronic diseases because they make a lot more money on treating people who are sick than preventing things. But then philosophically, this is all justifiable within the medical system, even by doctors and nurses and all the rest of it who mean well and who really want to help people because they're like, well, you're coming in, you've got a bit of pain or whatever. Don't make such a fuss. You're not almost dead. I just dealt with this person, yesterday who
Mm,
lost a leg, and I'm dealing with this person who like can't breathe without a ventilator. And you're talking about a little bit of pain. What are you wasting my time for? That's the basic attitude that you get if you go to a doctor, certainly in this country. Like, if you're not seriously ill, if it is not potentially life threatening, then they're not interested. And I'm sure everyone in the category of celiac has been classed like that by a medical doctor before, right? Because even though they are debilitating and they reduce the quality of your life, the truth is you can go around having celiac for the next 50, 60 years and it won't kill you. And so because of
Well,
that, they treat it.
some people it does impact that way.
Well,
It
let
can
me
get
clarify
quite
that.
yes, yeah.
From their perspective, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
the
yeah,
same
yeah.
thing. I focus a lot on the hypothyroidism. I think low thyroid function is epidemic. I'd say it's maybe 30 to 40% of the population. They act as if it's 1 or 2%.
Mhm.
And their perspective is if you have low thyroid function, you can still survive for another 50 years. It won't kill you. And so therefore it's not a big deal and we're not interested. But I
Right.
would say that low thyroid function is a contributor towards heart disease, is a contributor towards um, acute infections, which respiratory infections are still, I think, number 4 or 5 in the top
Yeah.
causes of death, top 10. Like, so I actually do think that it can kill you, but it doesn't do it in a direct way that they recognize. And so therefore they deprioritize it and treat it as if it's, like you're wasting their time. And they don't always treat you as if you're wasting their time if you don't have something serious, just to clarify. But if you have something not serious, but they know an easy solution to it, or here's some antacids, here's some cortisone cream, here's some antibiotics, then sure, they're happy to help. But if there's no easy answers to what's going on for you, especially if your symptoms are diffuse and generalized as opposed to specific and localized, you know, like that's why I mentioned thyroid, right? It's like I've got low energy, I've got anxiety and or depression, I've got digestive issues, I've got chronic infections, I've got allergies and or intolerances, I feel cold all the time, my sex drive is low, my hormones are out of balance, my skin is dry, uh, like I have a tendency to gain weight and I don't understand why. This is such a diffuse set of symptoms that doctors are like, this is just old. You're just getting old. This is aging. This is like they,
Mhm.
they just get rid of you. But actually, like this is incredibly easy to solve. Sometimes with nutritional intervention, sometimes by looking at underlying toxicity, most easily usually just by giving someone a bit of thyroid glandular,
Yeah.
which used to be part of all of our diets anyway, until about 100 years ago when they decided that thyroid hormone in an animal is a drug. And now if you go to a butcher and you ask for a pancreas, a spleen, a liver, any other organ, a heart, they will give it to you. But if you ask for a thyroid, they're not allowed to give it to you because it contains something that's classed as a pharmaceutical drug. So suddenly, we've had this thing removed from our diet, which had been in our diet for such a long time. And the only way we can get it is on prescription from a doctor. And the only way a normal doctor will give it to us on prescription is if we're in the very worst cohort of the most significantly and obviously and testably hypothyroid. And everyone else who has the kind of symptoms I just listed a minute ago, which again, a lot of people do, especially women, especially by the time they reach middle age, they're basically given antidepressants if, mood is the main issue, or they're given like Ozempic if weight gain is the main issue or whatever, but like the actual root cause is not addressed. They're given statins if high cholesterol is the main issue, but high cholesterol is fundamentally caused by low thyroid as far as I'm concerned, and all the evidence shows. So yeah, it's long answer to a long question.
No, no,
Okay.
no. I I think that this is all super helpful and valid points. And I was very lucky after a decade of going to different doctors and trying to figure stuff out. I finally found a doctor that had your mentality. So when I got these results, she was able to walk me through it. I
Oh
guess
yeah. Sorry,
for
can I just add to that? That was the
yeah,
last part of the question I didn't answer.
yeah, no,
Take responsibility is the first step, but the second step is absolutely what you just said.
yeah,
Realize that there are medical doctors, MDs, functional medicine doctors, all these kind of practitioners who do get it, who do understand everything that I'm talking about, and to persist in finding one. And if you have to go through 5, 10, 20, doctors until you find that person, that's why I used to teach all this stuff on my podcast, my
right,
YouTube channel. And then I get a lot of comments saying, "Oh, that's very like with the thyroid thing. Oh, it's all very well, but my doctor doesn't get this. Doctors don't get this." And so recently, I'm starting to have on more doctors, just who get all of this, just more as
yeah,
like a look. They do exist. It's not.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
not just me. They are out there. And so yeah, it's great that you. I'm sorry it took you 10 years to find someone, but as you say, they do exist, right?
yeah, yeah. Because it's sometimes you get, I think, as you were realizing, you get one diagnosis, which my first diagnosis was celiac, and that was found on accident.
Mm,
But then that didn't solve the problem.
mm,
In fact, I started eating gluten free, and then that's when everything started because I was asymptomatic. I was not having any issues, and then I started eating gluten free, and it was like Pandora's box was opened. And everybody kept dismissing me and saying, "Oh, well, if you're eating gluten free, then you should feel fine. So I don't get what you're complaining for." And I was like, I feel like that's not the right answer here. So it took a lot, and kept running into these male of a certain age that just had been through, and they just didn't want to deal with it anymore. And
mm.
I think they had the mentality that you spoke of like, well, it's not going to kill you. Get over it. Like, chuck it up, mate. Like, you're fine. And then finally I found a doctor where she was like, okay, never, like, your quality of life matters too. Like, yes, you're
Mm.
free and doing everything you should. You shouldn't be in pain. Let's try and solve the problem now so this doesn't get worse. And then we have to put you through surgeries, and then it becomes a really bigger problem. So
I'd
it's
love to
like,
address what you just said there because I think that's part of the problem, and this is the thing that I slipped into as well. I think when people realize the medical establishment can't help them, when that happens to them, the next thing they usually do is turn to what I call the gurus.
yes,
And these are often people who are male, as you said, not although not always. They often speak with a high degree of confidence and they make very dogmatic black and white statements. It's like
yep,
gluten free is the answer, keto is the answer,
yeah,
vegan is the answer, carnivore is the answer. They often base it on diet, although not exclusively. Sounds like juice fasting is the answer.
yeah.
Fasting is the answer. Da, da, da. Like it, and or the alkaline water is the answer, or this crazy device is the answer. Sometimes it's something a bit more, but often it's diet, and they are usually very for whatever reason, like they have a maybe a cognitive bias where maybe because they've had so much feedback from people who it has worked, that when you as someone says, actually I tried the vegan diet and I felt worse, or I tried going gluten free and it made me worse, or whatever, instead of going, oh, I'm sorry to hear that, that's interesting, let's try and work out what's going on, instead what they do is they go, you must not be doing it
Right.
right. You
Yeah.
must be wrong. It can't be
Yeah.
me. My black and white one size fits all dogmatic system can't be the problem. It must
Yeah.
be you. And I
Yeah.
see so many people actually falling for that and believing that because these
Yeah.
gurus say it with such confidence and certainty, and they have this army of people behind them who all affirm them and sometimes, gaslight even more than they do on their behalf in these groups and stuff like that. It's because you're not vegan enough, it's because you're not carnivore enough, it's because you're not keto enough, or whatever it might be. And it's hard to stick to any of these things extremely. So people go, oh yeah, well, I did have some carbs last month, or oh, I did have a bit of butter, or like maybe it is me, I didn't follow it properly, and
Yeah.
people can get stuck in that for years and years and years and years.
Yeah.
And so that's really the mission. Genetic Insights is an example of it, but it's actually, the first step of my 7-step system called the Rejuvenate Blueprint. The idea being that whatever the root causes of your issue, it's going to be one or more of those 7 elements. But I always start with genetics because it's your starting place. But there are other things involved in it. Um, but the point is this: I have not found anything that is universally beneficial for
Mm.
everyone.
Yeah.
Like there is always exceptions, and a lot of, and there's a few things, but that are like almost universally. I remember I did this on an episode of my podcast recently, and I asked my co-host. I said, "Is there anything you think of?" And they did come up with a good one. I can't remember it now off the top of my head. There are a few things that are almost universally beneficial. Oh, maybe it was like purifying the air or purifying the water. That's pretty much going to be beneficial for everyone. The air that you breathe or the water that you drink, but almost all of the advice that's out there that's taught as this will be the curative thing for you, like go gluten free or
Mm.
go on the autoimmune protocol, go keto or go vegan or go fruitarian, any of these things. All of these things are extremely polarizing in that, yes, they do help at least a percentage of the population. Obviously, otherwise they wouldn't have caught on and become popular. They help them for at least a period of time, although it's arguable with some of the more extreme ones if they are sustainable. But none of them are applicable to everyone. And in fact, there is a substantial portion of the population that not only will they not help, but they will actually make you worse. And
Yeah.
so that's why it's so important, the kind of work that we're doing, where we help people work out the specific thing that is relevant for them, not to give a blanket uniform. This is the advice to everyone. So I know when I say I have a 7-step blueprint, everyone, oh, another system, but it's
Yeah.
not a system that tells you do this, do this, do this, do this, and then everything will be fine. It's like helping you identify what is it for you. Like, carbs is a common one, right? Are carbs good for you? Are carbs bad for you? There's all kinds of scientific studies showing that if you go low carb, you can cure all kinds of diseases. But you know what? Less well known these days. There's all kinds of scientific studies that show if you go extremely high carb, I've seen a potato based diet, I've even seen a sugar diet where people cure themselves of diabetes. Like, it's not as simple as like one or the other. It's not as simple as no plant food or all plant food. And all of these kind of false things that, and then people are arguing about it and defending their point of view and trying to gaslight anyone who doesn't agree. And it's all of this stuff. And the truth is, I'm in favor of things that help people work out what is it specifically for me
Mm.
that's going to help.
Yes.
And I know there are some people out there who are teaching that, but then my problem with them is often they're too vague. They're like,
Yeah.
well, you just got to listen to your intuition, man, and just like go with the flow and let things come to you. And it's like, actually, I've seen people bumbling around trying to do that for decades, not getting anywhere of their health either. Like, you have to actually test, and if you're not in a place where you can do that well enough for yourself, which most people can't because it does require a high degree of knowledge, then you need to find a person or people who help you in that process, and you've got to keep testing until you find out the things that are relevant for you. And I don't know if you found that to be the case in your experience.
Yes, with yes, I'm trying to pick apart which piece of what you said. Yes, but ultimately, yes, I agree with everything that you just said. That because a lot of people come to me asking for advice on how to go about things as well, and I'm like, I'm not. What works for me doesn't. What works for the goose doesn't work for the gander here because I have
Yep.
not just celiac disease, I have gastroparesis, and I don't. And I think that also confuses people that don't ask me for advice or just existing with me of you're supposed to fit in this box. You have celiac disease, so you should just be able to eat gluten free and we should be able to just do whatever. And it's like, no, no, I have all these other conditions that I have to make sure to feed myself, to take care of myself. And mental health stuff, physical things. I can't go running, otherwise I'm in big trouble. It really upsets my system to go running, and I keep getting yelled at of, you need to go running. I'm like, no, no, no.
Mm,
What works for you is not working for me. In that case, it really impacts me in a very negative way if I go for a run. I wish I
yep.
could, or do I don't think I do actually, but I once I
Well,
got
it'd
to
be
the
nice to have the option. I know what you
Yes,
mean, but
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. So, I do agree with you that, I feel like we all just need to take better care of each other and be more considerate, empathetic, and all those other things, to take it just a step further. But I usually
And,
ask.
and
Oh,
and sorry if
sorry.
I may comment on that.
Yeah,
Like genetics really helped me with that because I think I
yeah,
was one of those people who were like, God, what's wrong with you? Why can't you just? And then with other people, and then I was that way with myself as well.
yeah,
Like I was
yeah,
very harsh judgments about why can't I just do this or why is this so difficult or whatever. And the genetics for me more than anything else really helped me to see, that's why this is easy for me and not for someone else. This is
yeah,
why this is really difficult for me and it's easy for someone else. And it really helped with that compassion for me more than anything because
yeah,
I think I am quite a skeptical, analytical, whatever person. And so,
yeah,
like, general principles of you should just love yourself and love others. As much as I wanted to take it on, like in practice, there was like, oh, but why, why can't you just, or
yeah.
why can't
Of
I
course,
just? But
yes.
when I actually saw it for myself, and it's like, oh, I kept asking that question, why can't I just? Well, there's the answer,
Yeah,
So, and like weight loss, I've, as I said, I was underweight my whole life. Now I'm actually the correct weight, which
that's
is my genetic tendency. I'm just
yeah,
middle, right in the middle of the BMI. Um, and but I've never been overweight. That's the point I was going to make. And so I was, it's very easy for people who've never been overweight to be very critical. Oh, you're just lazy. You're not exercising enough. You're eating too much. These kind of cliches. And then when I actually looked into it, I'm like, actually, there's loads of reasons why it is way harder for some people to lose weight than
yes,
others. And I'm just, well, I don't know if I'm lucky to have such severe digestive issues that I couldn't put on weight in the past. But the point is like that judgment of other people for finding things more difficult than you do, or like depression. Like, why can't you snap out of it? Why can't you just focus on the positive? That's
right.
really hard for some people to do,
Mm,
or even like I have always been a night owl. I always get up late and go to bed late. I've been capable of getting up early when I had a job for several years or whatever, but as soon as I had a choice, my body would naturally go to being later. See
yeah,
my genetics, night owl. And it's like it makes sense that out of a tribe going back hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years, there would be a small percentage who would be genetically predisposed to be up late because then they would be able to watch out for the safety and the security of the tribe while everyone else is asleep. This is natural. But I was making myself wrong because I didn't fit into the mold of everyone else. And so, yeah, I totally agree with you about the compassion for yourself and others. And I do think this is a tool that can help for that with that if you are an analytical kind of person, you want to know the why.
yeah, 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 for sure. We are approaching the end of our time somehow. This flew by,
Ah.
and I feel like we have so much more to talk about. So you'll just have to come back. But I do end every episode with three rapid fire questions that I ask every guest. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
So, what, in your opinion, is the city with the best food?
The city with the best food. That's a good question. It's certainly not in England. Um, it's kind of cliche, but I suppose New York has
Okay,
excellent dining.
I'll take it as a born and raised New Yorker. I will take it from you. Do you prefer a vacation that requires you to be active or relax?
These days, definitely relaxed.
And what is the city that where you learned the most about yourself?
Well, kind of. I try and avoid cities, and I don't like most cities. Um,
Or
I s-
town?
I suppose, well, ditto. I'm pretty much in the countryside all the time. But no, to answer your question, I liked LA a lot. I spent a lot of time in LA
Okay.
over the course of a few years, and I liked elements of it and disliked elements of it. And I do think I learned a lot and met some very interesting people. So I guess I'll give that as the answer.
Perfect.
These are good
And
questions I've never been asked before.
then, good. um, and then, of course, where can people find you?
If you would like to hear more of my teachings on things, then my podcast is called the Rejuvenate Podcast, and it's on youtube.com/Elwin Robinson, which is my name. If you go there, I regularly check and answer all comments. So if you want to ask me a question, that's probably the best place to do it. If you're interested in the genetic testing services that we offer, if you go to geneticinsights.co, and what I would like to do for your audience, if you're open to it,
Yeah.
would be to offer a 25% off coupon code. As I said earlier, like the goal of Genetic Insights is really to make the best possible genetic advice simpler and cheaper than is
Yeah.
available anywhere else. Um, but we like to kind of over deliver that as it's kind of a reward as well for listening to a whole podcast, because I know
Yeah.
a lot of people don't. So that's why I always give it at the end. But yeah, if you'd like to get 25% off, if you want to use the coupon code Learn True Health, all capital letters, no spaces, then that will give you an additional 25% off your order at geneticinsights.co.
Perfect. All right. Awesome. I'll probably use it myself. So thank you
Fantastic.
so much. All right. Amazing. It was lovely to speak with you, and we'll have to figure out how to get you back on here, especially for the next season because we're approaching the end of season one. So thank you so much, Elwin. I really appreciate chatting with you, and this was incredibly helpful. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. I'd love to. I really enjoyed it.
Amazing. Thank you for joining me this week for all the fun journeys and lessons learned on my big adventure called life. For more information on the different cities discussed, check out the blog posts on hieatexplorelove.com, posted every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. If you have any questions or fun stories to share, feel free to reach out at hieatexplorelove@gmail.com. Until next week, remember to eat well, explore the world, and love yourself. See you next time. This episode is produced, scripted, and edited by me, Ashley. Special thanks to Sarah Mientka.